So I started North Shore Sauna, I believe it was the very end of August of 2021. I was a master's student at UMD, and I had a tent sauna from another company, international company, and friends would borrow it. It was getting damaged, it was getting beat up pretty bad, but it was a really special experience setting up that first tent sauna right on the shore, Lake Superior, and being able to hear the water and have your feet on the ground and be able to just go out the door right into the water. And I enjoyed sharing that with people, but my tent sauna was getting ruined and I was paying the price. And I just thought, what a neat, thing if I could just get a couple of these and then, start a little business just as a hobby, rent them out locally. The only goal really was to recoup my cost, maybe in a year. And so that's how it was born. Pretty quickly evolved. I was actually going to become a dealer for that company because they were selling directly from Russia, and it was a pretty clunky process, buying them and then waiting a long time to get them shipped. And so I was working on becoming a dealer, and then the Ukraine-Russia war started. The EU sanctions quickly prevented them from shipping their product out of Russia, and so there was no tent sauna supply in the United States at all. Since I was already in that space, I thought, well, maybe I should look into getting my own manufactured, came up with my own design, found a manufacturer, placed my first order. They arrived 2 different times really, but in the fall of 2022, and they sold really quickly. I had a single page website, everything was clunky, no real marketing, but I was the first US-based company selling this product. And, very little supply, higher relative demand. They sold really well. And so, continued with that, came up with more designs, higher volume, recruited some employees. It's just kind of grown organically from there.
I grew up extended family did saunas. My parents didn't get one till after I had moved out of the house. They finally put one in their basement. But my cousins always had them, so I would take one sauna a month maybe, family, friends, yeah. So it's been there, but it wasn't an integral part like it is now. So now sauna is my life. I love taking saunas, and I do it for work, so I get to show everyone how amazing it is, what you can do, where you can go. Yeah, that's what I do now.
Yeah, so most of my family, Finnish, majority are primarily Finnish by heritage. So we've always had a sauna, relatives, friends, there was always a sauna hot. Typically Wednesday, kind of midweek, and then Saturday night, right? Kind of get clean and whatnot for church on Sunday. So I grew up taking sauna. It was kind of just a normal part of life, right? It wasn't like a special or trendy thing. It was just something we did. This is my first real attempt at entrepreneurship, and openness to failure, openness to feedback, openness to, things not going the way you would expect them to. But maybe a part of that openness is a belief that, you know, if you don't quit, if you're willing to keep trying and iterate and change and adapt and grow, that you can continue. And yeah, it's openness to growth, right? Think of that growth mindset, right? It's far more challenging, but also far more rewarding than anything else I've ever done.
I started doing it on the side from Washington for Chad, North Shore Sauna, and I was selling saunas there and fulfilling orders from there. And then eventually we got busy enough to where we wanted to consolidate so we could take time off. Chad could take a vacation or I could take a vacation. He talked me into moving here. Here I am.
Sauna is a part of the local culture. Duluth is the sauna capital of the United States. And I think that has a pretty significant bearing on, you know, us as a sauna business. I think it lends us a real, you know, credibility just from the, you know, the amount of Finnish, you know, and that's Scandinavian heritage kind of culture that's in the area, right? We have public saunas that have been here forever. We have that culture, we have that environment, and being embedded within that, I think, really helps. So our goal has been accessibility from the beginning, right? It's a wonderful experience, and we want as many people as possible to be able to have that experience.
The fact you can take them almost anywhere, like on the lake, is amazing. I love going out in the woods and doing it, in the trees. If you can get a creek or a river nearby, that's amazing, but I like the sound of the forest for sure.
One of the things, I guess, that I think of, you know, when people ask about the sauna tents is the most common first impression that people have when they're introduced to the concept is skepticism, right? I think there's something about a tent that has maybe kind of a negative connotation, where people are like, really? You know, a sauna in a tent? Like, how good can it be? How hot can it get? Like, what's the experience like? But one of the maybe most satisfying parts of the business is actually when people do experience it, there's such a contrast between their expectations and then their experience. It really blows people away. I've had multiple people that are already familiar with sauna tell me that this is the best sauna experience I've ever had, you know, and completely unsolicited. And that's immensely gratifying to hear, you know, and it's fun just blowing people's expectations out of the water.